everyone. Welcome to the 2022 Honors Thesis Symposium. My name is Dr. Mariah McCracken. I will be your moderator this afternoon. Next up is Jake Thoman. Jake's thesis title is Becoming a Prince, a Critique of Machiavelli. And Jake worked with Dr. Thompson in political science. I'm going to turn it over to Jake, and we'll get started. A round of applause to give him.
Thank you guys all for being here. So before I get into my critique of Machiavellian, I want to make three things very clear about this. The inspiration for this thesis comes from sitting in the Honors Symposium my freshman year, where all I wanted to do was create a psychological study with a friend of mine where we could teach people more about themselves. And so what I've ensconced in this theory is I want people to learn from what I'm saying. I don't just want to present information that I have. Second, I'm wearing socks that have a depiction of Eric Cartman saying, "Respect my authority," because I'm talking about power theory, and I think that's relevant. Third, this is an informal presentation, a revolutionary thesis for the entrepreneurial citizen. I have timed it once, I have rehearsed it once. I seek to challenge Machiavelli's idea that power and knowledge is only for those who are adequate to rule. Anyone can become the prince, anyone can rule themselves, and therefore this presentation takes the form of memes that I've created myself. First off, my thesis that I wrote has four distinct portions of it. 1, who is Machiavelli? 2, what did he believe in his theory? 3, when will another individual finish his task, his theory? And 4, where is his republic now? Finally, this presentation features something that is not in my thesis, a modern critique of why the priests don't like my cool guitar. And we'll get into that later. So first, who was the Florentine? Niccolo Machiavelli lived in 1469 to 1527 AD. He was a practical politician. He was not a philosopher at his time. He would rather practice what he taught rather than seek for individuals to question it further. Hot take, he thought shadow governments were bad. I agree. He lived under the Medici rule, a powerful family in Florence who believed that they could control aspects of government through proxies in a democratic form, as well as control economic and trade sanctions throughout the area. Now, Machiavelli believes that his gift of knowledge to Lorenzo Medici, the ruler at the time, his theory entitled The Prince, is a gift of his knowledge. All that he is, ensconced in this theory, creating a better understanding for how to rule people rather than allow them to rule themselves. He lived in a time that was incredibly corrupt, the irony of which he was imprisoned and tortured at the hands of a corrupt government, potentially inspiring why he believes others should take up the idea of the prince and dispose of corruption throughout the government. And finally, I disagree with his argument that if you know, you know. Only individuals who understand the true nature of humans are allowed to rule, and that is we are innately self-interested. I disagree with this, and I believe that anyone can become their own ruler with self-mastery, discipline, and knowledge. So what is Machiavelli's theory of democracy? Well, picture it as a wave. It's a twofold theory that at the height of the first wave is the idea of democracy, fully realized, liberty, equal law, access to forms where you can express yourselves. At the bottom point, the trough in the wavelength, is not a low point, but rather the height of the prince, a period of authoritarian government where the prince exercises power and command over his subjects to ensure that they don't rise to corruption once again, and when they are ready, can properly institute their own democracy with proper forms. Now, the height of the wavelength represents a period that is full of religion. I include the famous quote from Karl Marx, "Religion is the opiate of the masses." A prince should not embrace the religion that he follows. In Machiavelli's time, Christianity in Rome. Instead, he should use it to his own means. As people believe in the morality of religion, he should be able to utilize that same element in his own religion, entitled the civic religion. Now, the prince's civic religion is not used by himself, but commanded amongst his people, to encourage them to admire the great heroes of our past. If we embody such ideas, those of Alexander the Great, Nero, Herod, the people who made our empires strong and forceful, we too can become heroes of the past in the modern time. Now, this has a couple drawbacks. Machiavelli did not live at a time that was ripe with democracy rather than corruption, so he had to form this theory in a way that molded with what he knew, a corrupt government that needs to be deposed. And finally, he believed that authority trumps power. The civic religion doesn't authoritate power. Rather, it gives the idea that citizens should not only trust the law because it is in their self-interest, because it keeps them safe, but also that it is morally correct and powerful because of what has been given to it by the prince. Now, the prince's role himself is not to engage with corrupt government, but rather throw it completely out the window. He must oppose corruption and bring the people into a more moral standing. He must not listen to his advisors that seek to coerce him into making poor decisions and may even attempt to depose them himself. And finally, he cannot fear retaliation amongst the people. Now, these ideas are conveyed through tools that Machiavelli gives, primarily the three: political appearance, the ideas of virtue and fortuna, as well as limited violence and power. Now, in political appearance, Machiavelli says a prince must not be moral himself. He needs to make the hard decisions that individuals of lower stature cannot be able to make, such as imposing power, killing off bloodlines, making sure that people cannot rise up against him. In other words, he must lie and keep a good face to the people that he rules. Second, the ideas of virtue and fortuna are Italian and roughly translate to boldness and fortune. Using boldness, one must properly seize the feminine idea of fortuna and make destiny their own. By creating this moment in time where they seize destiny and forward their own republic, the prince shows himself as a man of virtue, of boldness, and curiosity to go where no man has gone before. However, if the prince is to fail, it is not his fault, merely a bad portion of time, a very one-sided argument towards the prince. And finally, he has the ability to use limited violence to control his power and ensure that others respect him and do not revolt against him. Now, I propose in my thesis that this is a little problematic, primarily because all humans are meant to be self-interested. Does that not mean the prince himself is also self-interested to control his power, to last for a long time, to keep his rule, even though Machiavelli says he must not and can only retain it for as long as individuals are able to control a form of corrupt democracy? The prince himself needs to overcome these ideas, but what if in our society he cannot? I introduced the philosopher King. That dude's a pretty good looking guy. Now, the philosopher King is described as a member of the ruling elite who seek to apply philosophy in the exercise of power. I do not assert myself as a member of the elite looking to exercise power, but rather redefine the philosopher King as someone who is not afraid to use logic and reason to assert that individuals can overcome authoritarian ideas and create their own proper regimes. Machiavelli himself also writes, "If it brings me trouble and difficulty, it could also bring me reward through those who consider humanely the end of these labors of mine. If poor talent, little experience of present things, and weak knowledge of ancient things make this attempt of mine defective and of not much utility, it will at least show the path to someone with more virtue, more discourse and judgment, who will be able to fulfill this intention of mine." Machiavelli did not believe himself that his theory was perfect. He believed that someone would come after him, proving that as time changed, a new idea of government must be given to the people. I believe that my theory is that form of government that does not destroy what Machiavelli thought, but completes upon it. The Republic of Nobles and Princes is written by a theorist, John McCormick of the University of Michigan. He believes that during the time of the Republic in Machiavelli's writing, Machiavelli thought the Republic should be ruled by elites because they had the knowledge to do so. As my thesis does not agree with this, I believe the entrepreneurial citizen, an individual who emerges emerged during the Italian Renaissance, is the answer to Machiavelli's problem. Now, the nobility is obsessed with their immortal rule, the idea that they can keep control over a people forever, so long as the people are subjugated beneath them. We speak for you. Our foundations are just. These ideas are very apparent in the American democracy today. Many people who are in power believe that their voices speak for rather than with the individuals they represent. They believe that the foundations of our government are strong, true, and rigid, and do not have any flaw in them whatsoever. The entrepreneurial citizen, however, uses self-made astucia, the idea that they can analyze a situation and create the best aspect and resolve for themselves as for their fellow man. They utilize something known as the Giudicardian moment. Francisco Giudicardi was a contemporary of Machiavelli who believed that Machiavelli's theory was incomplete, that people themselves could seize a moment, seize virtue and fortuna, to hold representatives accountable, to keep the power away from them, and to keep corruption at bay. I believe that Giudicardi has fully realized this, and his theory is much more applicable towards controlling power as individuals rather than forcing authoritarians to do it ourselves. And finally, Abraham Lincoln, in the perpetuation of our political institution, writes, "They were the pillars of the temples of liberty, and now that they've crumbled away, we must replace them." The ideas that we once had as a country and once thought we were founded on are not so stable as we thought they were. I raise slavery, removing of Native Americans from their natural environment, opposition towards women and minority parties in government. These are problems that are rife within our society because we believe that our foundations are solid and cannot be changed. Now, I wouldn't be writing a proper thesis in political science at St. Edward's without bringing up 80s rock. Now, 2112 is a 21-minute, 12-second rock opera made by the band Rush. I believe that it shows a modern power struggle, according to Machiavelli. It begins by describing the priests of Syrinx, a government-created religion that controls the narrative of society. These books are good. These songs are good. These ideas are good. You should not oppose us because we have your best interests at heart. Underneath us, there is prosperity and equality among men. Our hero, who we will call Wade Watts, one of the characters in Ready Player One, who goes through this trial at one point, finds a guitar in a waterfall and begins tuning and playing. He masters this new art form that has been lost throughout the ages. He brings it before the priest and says, "Look what I have created, look what I have found. It is full of volume and emotion. It can bring us much fortune." The priests strike him down and say, "No, this is against our narrative. We do not believe this is what is best for our society. Therefore, you should cast it away, never to think about challenging us again." Now, much as the people in my theory must do, they have a vision of full knowledge. Wade sees the humans that have left Earth long ago and they say, "No, this was not the downfall, like the priests have told you. This is what made us full. These ideas that completed us and completed our religion and our government sent us out into the stars to seek further knowledge, not to stay here and ride under the pain of oppressive regimes." Now, eventually, at the end of the song, the elder race returns with the knowledge that they have learned, overthrowing the authoritarian regime and showing that once and for all, individuals who ensconce upon themselves the idea of the prince, the value of knowledge, and the opposition towards authoritarian regimes triumph. Now, how do we, a people, become the prince? Through these 4 steps: education, unity, striking specifically, and honoring the traditions of our past. We must educate and expose the lies that our government tells to us, that we are expected to believe. We must oppose nobility as the unifying idea in a time where it feels that we are all too polarized and cannot agree in proper government. And finally, we must honor the forms that have come before us, that allow us to express ourselves rather than destroying them. Because if you destroy the pillars on which the temple stands, the temple will fall. But if you properly restore them and bring them to a new aspect of being, you hold the temple higher and it stays longer. Now finally, we're in a very transitional time in our government. We are between the wavelengths. We are between democracy and we are between the authoritarian regimes. It is upon us, the people, and our desire to gain knowledge, change ourselves, and change the government in which we will succeed over authoritarian regimes. We live in an age where knowledge is prevalent and cannot be hidden as Machiavelli so believed. Therefore, we must share that knowledge to empower one another rather than keeping it secret to a few nobles. Now, before I finish, I just want to thank specifically Dr. M.M. and Dr. Thomason, who have helped me manage my anxiety in completing this thesis, as well as inspiring me in class every day through political philosophy, through a study that I think is, or needs to be, more researched and more expressed to the general populace. I want to thank my family, who's going to watch this later, for supporting my ideas and challenging them to the fullest, rather than just letting me rant on about radicalism. And finally, to all of the theorists who are talking about their ideas today in the Honors College, thank you for giving your ideas to us, as well as appreciating and contributing to our idea of philosophy, the love of Sophia, our love of wisdom. Thank you all.
Sure.
Jay, and we'll give you your scroll and your cord for graduation, and then we'll open up the floor to questions. So you guys get a minute to process your questions.
So I just want to say, first of all, Jake, great job. Job was outstanding. And I'm really proud of Jake for all the work he's put in on this, and also all the courses and things that we worked on and talked to for hours on end about Machiavelli and all the other political theorists. So I was very impressed with the thesis. It's a unique way to look at Machiavelli, to not just simply discard Machiavelli, but also to take some of the ideas that he has and then redefine, which I think in a way, for the last minute, is very Machiavellian in itself. But I want to say congratulations, well deserved. Get a good break, have a celebration, and congratulations on completing the honors project. All right. Thanks.
Another round of applause.
Do you think that that memes as like a tool of the proletariat will help spread like this kind of messaging?
So you're talking about communism.
I mean, in a way. well, the means of the people. I should say.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So we live in an era where information is constantly shared amongst us. It feels like it is almost deafening to where the mistakes of politicians and those in power are almost made known in an instant. Those cannot remain secret. Those cannot be covered up. They need to be shared with people so that they can truly understand the nature of what Machiavelli gives to us, the political appearance, that individuals can lie to us for our safety. That can't be true anymore because there are no more lies that we have an immense access to knowledge, immense access to information, and therefore the time frame that Machiavelli works with cannot exist.
Do you think in the future regarding like deepfakes and other things that have been done that the government may eventually have power again into the future? Like obviously contextually right now I feel like that's not the case where things are very hard to cover up. That in the future it might be hard to tell what is true versus what is fake.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
kind of implications.
Yeah, so Machiavelli in his theory prescribes the political appearance for lying to the general public. In my theory, I sort of champion over that in saying that the individuals who seek to overtake the idea of the prince, who seek to take upon themselves that authoritarian role of knowledge, need to share it amongst the individuals that are beside them rather than keeping it to themselves. Through that process, you almost exchange knowledge rather than keeping it inward. Through that understanding of knowledge, we're more able to identify mistakes in our society, such as these ideas of deepfake, false narratives, fake news, as some politicians often call it. And the ability for ourselves to overcome the idea of authoritarian government in the future is eventually given back to the people as we champion that idea of knowledge and honor the forms of the past rather than get rid of them.
One more round